You'll go to hell if you've lived in sin. So say your prayers, 'cause here comes Grim.
This is it for you? This jumped up firework display of a toy advert? People like you make me sick. What's wrong with you? Now, I don't care if you've saved up all your 50p's, okay? Take your pocket money and get out!
This is Chuck Wendig. Chuck is an arsehole, in my personal opinion. He is a bully and a rhetorical thug. Now, words can't actually hurt anybody, of course, but he is a hypocrite. And he was one of the chief architects of the online harassment during Gamergate that helped push me over the edge. And that's why I'm a bit late to this. Of course, I'm not saying he's the cause or anything. Like I just said, words can't actually hurt you. Any responsibility is my own. But still, it's the hypocrisy that bothers me.
Little Ewoks. An entire empire brought to its knees by small, furry creatures.
You know, he's launched into a rant against Star Wars fans, and thinking back, actually, the novel that he wrote for Star Wars should perhaps have been taken as a warning of the way in which the franchise was headed after Disney bought it up. As I recall, not having bought or read it, but as I recall, it is an example of tokenism, of shoving in woke issues for the sake of it, over and above story. Its online reviews aren't terribly good and seem to bear out that assessment, and most people just kind of dismissed it as a one-off, or thought that he shouldn't have been given the job. Fair enough, but it does seem that this was very much setting the tone for what would come next.
Now when we get there, it's important while we're doing this, we don't use our real names. From now on, we'll be using code names, okay? Mike, you're Luke. Brian, you're Chewie. Daisy, you're Leia. Twist, you're Jabba. I'm Han.
Can I be Han?
No!
Anyway, he's gone off because a lot of Star Wars fans, people who love Star Wars, do not like Disney Star Wars, do not like the wokeness of the new Star Wars, the way it has undermined the tropes and ideas that made Star Wars a success in the first place. Lucas, for all he's lost the plot recently, did know what he was doing in the original films. They're a pastiche, a mashup of the old serials that used to be shown in cinemas. The pulp serials, even. Adventure, mysticism, science fiction, you know, Flash Gordon, cowboys, all the rest of it. Plus, he shoved in there, for a bit of class perhaps, his love of Kurosawa films. And it was this mishmash, this cut-up, brought together that made Star Wars such a success, because it was drawing on all the good parts of all these things. Lucas came to those films as a fan of what came before, wanting to elevate and present that, not to change and usurp it. There's room for that, sure. But that wasn't what Star Wars was about. It was very much rooted in these old styles of hero, these old tried and true and tested tropes of heroism and mysticism and acts against the odds of actual heroes. And that's what I think has been undermined in what has been going on in the new Star Wars and the way in which they've gone about things.
I'm good. I've had a few things to work through, you know.
With Sarah?
No, with George Lucas.
He, however, seems to think that any objection that you might have to the new Star Wars, from the weak plotting, the destruction of everything that came before, the pissing on the ashes of what came before, he seems to think that must be an indication of sexism and racism, despite the fact that basically nobody except a few trolls is claiming that at all. He laundry lists groups that he blames for this: MRAs, incels, Gamergate, Comicsgate, sad puppies, real Star Wars fans, and so on. But apparently hasn't listened to any of them. Men's rights activists want equality in all matters between the genders, but with an emphasis on men who've been left behind. Incel has been turned into a pejorative, and really all it means is someone who can't get any sex, but wants some. And that should be something that is pitiable, and something with which we, most of us, as sexual beings, should have empathy. But no, not Chuck. Gamergate, he never understood what that was about in the first place. He's assuming it's sexism and racism, when in fact it was counter-censorship and a demand for ethical journalism. Comicsgate the same. They want good stories. They're sick of things, social issues being crowbarred in, and not via allegory, but just beating you over the head. Sad Puppies were concerned about nepotism in the Hugos, but no, he insists that it must be about sexism and misogyny, and now... Stop.
The Phantom Menace was 18 months ago, Tim.
I know, Bilbo. Okay, it still hurts. You know, that kid wanted a Jar Jar doll.
Kids like Jar Jar.
Why?
What about the Ewoks? Hey? They were rubbish. You don't complain about them.
Yeah, but Jar Jar Binks makes the Ewoks look like fucking Shaft.
Star Wars fans apparently raging from a poisonous combination of white supremacy and toxic masculinity. The only people I ever hear going on about white supremacy are actual fascists and people like Chuck. No one, I think, is claiming that whites are superior or anything of the sort. What they're complaining about is politics, like the idea of white supremacy and like the idea of toxic masculinity being shoved into something they love where it really doesn't fit with the milieu, doesn't fit with the idioms that we find in Star Wars. This isn't a huge cultural nod, which is what he has said that it is. It's the opposite. This is somewhere where we should be able to come together to escape from all this toxic nonsense. If there's any toxicity, it's coming from people like Chuck.
Why did you leave your last job?
I got fired.
Why?
Just a difference of opinion.
The Phantom Menace.
Yeah.
Didn't you like it?
No.
He doesn't seem to understand or appreciate why people hate this. He thinks that the reason people hate identity politics is that it involves politics that are not perfectly suited, do not perfectly invoke their singular identity, which is not what it is. We used to understand that identity was the least important thing about someone. We used to strive to be colorblind, to be gender blind. Now they want to place it at the center of everything and give it preeminent importance. If it is that important to have representation, to have your identity reflected in the films, which is not something that I agree with, then it would only make sense that as you remove people's representation within films that they get upset. I don't think that's the case. I think that's a cover for people who write something that's just not good.
Yes, we do stock Jar Jar Binks merchandise. Yeah, we've got him in cuddly form, lunchbox, action figure, and keyring. No problem. Bye-bye.
Well done, Tim. You've just taken your first step into a larger world.
Chuck is a bully because he picks on people who are acceptable targets. I used to participate in writing exercises that he had on his blog. I used to think he was just fighting the good fight, but over time I've come to realize that he's just a nasty, nasty bullying man who gets away with it because he picks the right targets. And that's really all he is. Persist. That's all I can suggest to Star Wars fans, and be absolute and explicit about why you're upset and what you're upset about. The more you drive that message home, the more obvious it is that these people will be lying about you. The reason which he objects to, he suggests the people who want the new Star Wars to fail are not Star Wars fans, but the reason they want these films to fail, the reason why Solo failed, I think, is because they want to preserve what little is left uncorrupted and unfucked with. People were so excited for new Star Wars films, and they wanted, while not the same, obviously, from the first one of the new trilogy, they wanted something different, but they wanted something that echoed in the same way. It should have been built from the same building blocks the original was, and should have appealed to the same sentiments, which are universal and timeless. Instead, it just hasn't made any sense. It's pissed over everything that people loved. And while you can't say it's ruined your childhood, it has ruined people's trust in and love of the franchise, at least when it comes to any new films. Chuck, you haven't the faintest fucking idea what you're talking about, and Solo has bombed so hard that all the future Star Wars stories films are under threat. Which is a shame, because the only good one they've released is Rogue One, which was a Star Wars story. Zang.
We'll see you at the rendezvous.
Okay, Tim.
Good luck.
When I was just a baby